As the new season is quickly approaching, it sadly looks like we're about to head into yet another tank meta. Riot just came out with a patch that's supposed to give bruisers some love and nerf some of the frustrating poke champions, but I don't think it's going to do that much. They did nerf Jace in particular, which thank God for, but tanks haven't really gotten any nerfs here, and the buffs that they gave were buffs to champions like Aatrox and top lane Kayn, so I'm not sure this is going to do too much in terms of changing how the meta is going. One thing I am excited for, though, is even if we are about to head into another tank meta, it looks like we'll have some more unusual tanks to pick from if you want to go down top lane. Some tanks that require a little bit of a brain to play properly, and tanks who just play differently overall than what we've been used to. And today we're going to be taking a look at the most unusual tank in the new upcoming picks that are gaining popularity, Sion. You may not know this, but Sion has slowly been climbing in win rate over the past year and has comfortably been hanging around the top 10 win rates for a while now. He currently has the highest win rate in solo queue for any tank and the 5th highest win rate overall. He's really good right now as a champion, but one of the things I personally find so interesting about him, other than how good he is just how weirdly he works compared to conventional tanks. One of the weird things about tanks in general is they sort of have reverse scaling to what you might think. Like the way that you expect a tank to scale in League would be they'd be really weak in the early game, they'd get really strong with their items in the mid to late game, but then fall off a little bit if the game extends too crazy long and people can start getting tank buster items as their last purchase, stuff like Blade of the Ruin King or something. Well, in reality, things work a little bit differently. Tanks actually have some of the highest win rates for games that end before 20 or 25 minutes. The reason being that many tanks are strong enough to win their lane anyway, even without their items, and if they're able to win their lane and get a little bit of a lead early on, they can get their items earlier and accelerate their scaling to endgame, so they have their endgame power spike by the time they're barely in mid game, and nobody can deal with them at that point. They just get to close out the match. So tanks with these kits that are broken enough to allow them to win their lanes, they're usually pretty good and get pretty solid win rates, but of course the one who is strongest of all of them is Sion. Sion has the 2nd highest win rate of any top laner in games that end before 25 minutes. The only champion with a higher win rate here is Jace, and he just got nerfed, let me remind you. Sion also has the 3rd highest win rate for games that end between 25 and 30 minutes, and this isn't just win rates slightly above 50%. These go as high as 57%, and if you look at games cut off even earlier, like at the 20-minute mark, it goes as high as 60%. If this isn't enough to get you interested or excited about the champion, let me remind you, the average game duration in this patch doesn't exceed 30 minutes for any rating, and this is for all regions. By the time you get up to Platinum and Diamond, you're already averaging out to 26-minute games, which means if you pick Sion here, you're essentially playing a 57% win rate champion. So why is Sion's win rate so high in these games? Well, I think there's a few things contributing to it. Firstly, he is a monster in lane. Because he can hit you for a pretty huge chunk of damage with his E, he gets all sorts of lane pressure. I mean, think about this scenario. Sion's E has a cast range that looks a little something like this, which doesn't look too crazy at first. I mean, it's a small cast range and it might deal a fair amount of damage, but it's pretty easy to avoid. But you have to remember the E has a weird ability where if he lands it on a minion, then that minion is going to get knocked back a considerable distance, and anything that minion passes through also takes the damage from his E. This means if he has enemy minions nearby, he essentially gets a cast range that looks something like this. And this is obviously pretty scary and frustrating to deal with when a Sion maxes this ability first. If you get hit by a few of these E's, it's like getting hit with a Xerath Q or a Jace combo or something, where he can poke you down really quickly and effectively. Now consider this. If Sion is standing here near his opponent's minions so he can take advantage of this E's ability, and he's forcing you to stand so far away, where would that put his minions in this scenario? Yeah, this is what makes Sion's laning so dominant. He can zone you from CS ridiculously easy, forcing you to either stand miles away and lose all your CS and possibly experience, or you'll risk getting hit with a devastating skill shot and engaged upon. The damage that comes out from this, especially if you follow it up with the rest of his combo, chunks everybody, and I mean that, everybody. Normally, bruisers are the class that can sometimes deal with the tank in laning phase, but nope, not with this early game damage and early tankiness. Other tanks, nobody bursts nearly as much damage as quickly as Sion does, and the way that his E shreds armor allows him to outduel any other tank in lane, save for maybe Ornn. I haven't seen him against another Juggernaut yet, I'll be honest, but with all of the disables he has and the lack of mobility that Juggernauts have, that certainly can't be a favorable matchup for most champions. One of the toughest parts about playing against Sion is he's a bit of a caster tank, meaning that he only has to use his abilities to trade against you and doesn't have to auto attack. Remember, auto attacks pull minion aggro in League of Legends, which is a pretty substantial portion of top lane. Top laners heavily rely on manipulating minion aggro damage when laning against someone. You either want to stand near a very large wave of minions preventing opponents from engaging on you because they can't take minion aggro, or sometimes bruisers really have to consider if they can go in for a trade, or even if they have a really big lead, that doesn't always matter if there's a huge minion wave nearby that they also have to tank damage from. This is something that can really swing a lane and normally is a very big and important part of top lane. Even other tanks have to auto attack. Malphite has to auto attack to make the most of his W, or Maokai has to auto attack to proc his passive, but Sion is interesting in that he doesn't need to auto you to deal any damage. Spells that damage you do not pull minion aggro, so he can stand in the middle of a really huge minion wave, and as long as he has minions nearby for his opponent's creeps to focus, he's not in any danger at all. He can E you, Q you, pop his W, and he's never going to pull minion aggro, and this of course makes his harass and his lane bullying so frustrating to play against that there's not really traditional top lane mechanics you can use to outdamage him. The only thing that stops him from killing you is yourself. The nice thing about laning against a Sion, and the one little silver lining you have, is his abilities are incredibly telegraphed, meaning they're very easy to see when they're coming, and they can be kind of easy to get out of the way of. It's actually very hard for a Sion player to get a solo kill on you, since if you're playing in a rating like Platinum or Diamond or above, players aren't just going to gift you kills. Since even if you get hit with a skill shot, he generally needs to either have you low enough already that a single combo is going to kill you, or he's going to have to stand around quite a bit and auto attack you, maybe get a second combo off before he finishes you off for a kill. If you're a smart player, or if you're in a decent rating, you're already going to be backing before you get low enough that he can kill you with a single combo. But just because he can't kill you doesn't mean he's not going to win. This zoning potential he has is going to get him a huge CS lead, and if about 13 CS or so equals a kill, he's going to be 5-0 by the time you're at the 15-minute mark. So whether it's gold through kills, gold through CS, or whatever, Sion is going to get ahead unless you have perfect mechanical play where you can go forward, last hit a bunch of minions, never get hit by any of his skill shots ever, and even in that scenario, you're just breaking even with him in lane. You're both farming up your waves. Now, if you're searching for a way to beat Sion, it's actually pretty simple. You can rely on general solo queue stuff. Like if you have your mid lane and your bot lane and your jungle win, then who cares if Sion won lane? He's not going to be able to carry his team, who's crazy far behind at that point. Additionally, you can have a few things like maybe your jungler come up and camp him. Sion has no mobility outside of his ultimate after all, so constant ganks could still win you a lane. But these aren't things you can rely on, obviously, and that's why Sion currently has the highest win rate in game for a tank and one of the top 5 highest win rates overall for top lane. I mean, he's probably the best solo queue tank you can blind pick out there. There's no AP champions that can counterpick him the way you can counterpick a Malphite with Rumble or Vladimir. He deals damage and can be a much larger force in the early game laning phase with zoning that's stronger than other tanks like Maokai, and that's how you get as high as a 60% win rate. Now, you may be asking what suddenly made Sion so good. I mean, he wasn't always this good before the preseason, was he? There must be some change in preseason that made him better than he was before. And yes, there was. And like almost every strong champion now, you know what it is. It's the new rune system. Sion was already a decently good top lane, but what really makes him good now is the runes, specifically runes in the sorcery tree. Between free mana, allowing you to spam your abilities even more so with mana flow band, the extra damage when landing a spell from Scorch, and the cooldown reduction or extra movement that you can get. I mean, you already have a lot of things here that can make his laning much stronger than it was before. But what I really think put him over the edge here was Meteor. I swear, this Meteor keystone is so good on so many champions. If your champion has a slow or a stun that you use frequently, you get to basically all but guarantee landing your Meteor for a pretty ridiculous amount of damage. And of course, not only does Sion have his E that slows enough to land the Meteor, but he also has his Q that can either knock up or slow to land it as well. The bonus damage all of this gave Sion just put him into a place that's like what we saw with Poppy after her initial rework. It's a place where you have insane damage while still building full tank. You have insane tankiness because you're building full tank. You have no weak point in the game since you can abuse opponents from level 1 onwards in laning phase, which is supposedly your weakest point in the game. You're still incredibly strong there. And you have an ultimate that it's kind of good, but even with that great ultimate, you can afford to totally miss it and still do well with just how good everything else in your kit is. Honestly, it seems like every time Riot says they're going to nerf tanks and make bruisers better, they always give these backhanded nerfs. They'll nerf a few strong tanks, but they'll also introduce Bramble Vest, which just kills all bruiser viability. Or more recently, you know, they're going to nerf Ornn, which people are complaining about, so he's not automatically a free win if he gets picked. But they also buff Sunfire, meaning that every tank can rush Sunfire and do just as well as they were before any nerfs they got. I mean, it's stuff like this that makes me so hesitant to believe bruisers are ever going to be good again. But the cool thing is now at least we have a few new tanks. If this really is another tank meta at the start of the new season, we're going to have Sion, we're going to have Maokai, we're going to have Malphite, Singed, and Nasus all serving as highly contested strong picks top lane. I mean, Nasus is technically a juggernaut. This is a lot different than when we just saw Maokai Shen every game. Maokai Shen, Maokai Shen, Maokai Poppy. It's still a bit of a crummy situation, but we can make the best out of it with some new fresh blood, mixing things up a bit with the meta top lane. I personally am excited for it either way. When the new season officially begins, we might have a few non-viable tank picks top lane, which would be awesome, but even if we don't, we're still going to have some weird new champions who are very, very meta. Anyway, that's all for today. I hope you all enjoyed watching today's video. I will see you all next time, but until then, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.